do that to there. Go there. Now that, you've got two screens going, okay? Got your PowerPoint there.
Looks like it.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. The joint workshop with the Cache Fire District Board as well as the County Council. We'll excuse Chair Sandy Goodlander. She is traveling. She may be joining us through technology in some way, shape, or form. Right, Andrew? She's
Working on that.
Okay, we're working on that. So she may be joining us in some way. So we'll go ahead and get started. I think that this is we need to have a motion to approve the agenda that we have, or just I guess it's a workshop, so we need to disapprove the minutes, but even though it's not listed last meeting.
I think you would just go for the workshop, and then once the regular council meeting starts, then go there.
Well, this is district.
Okay.
This is the fire district.
Oh, yeah, for the fire
board,
district board.
for the
Yes,
fire
that
district
part,
board. So
yes.
if one of the members of the fire board would like to make a motion to approve the last meeting's minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Larry?
Question, there were emails about including in the minutes the terms that we all drew lots for. Are those now part of the minutes? I didn't see them in.
Yeah,
Those are now part of the minutes?
yeah. When you go onto the county webpage too, I'll post the minutes on there as well, the most recent
Okay, thank
agenda
you.
meeting.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on, and we are going to have the background of the foundation, purpose, and history of the fire district, and I think that Chief Hammer will be doing that. Okay, we'll go ahead and give you the time.
Okay, do you mind if I kind of cover all three of those top ones at the same time?
By all means, yes.
So thanks for being here. I know the fire board, the board of trustees was a little overwhelmed last time. There was a lot of information, and I think we need to take it in bits and pieces to kind of understand the scope of what we're talking about. There were a lot of conversations prior to adding board members, and I think that you may not have gotten all the background that you need to make a decision. So I'm gonna step back a couple steps on where we started originally, and then I'm going to talk about the fire service and cache in the district in certain aspects. So if you have any questions as we go through, go ahead and fire them out. If you don't, that's fine, but please, I'd rather answer them now than have them linger in your mind. So we talked last time, the fire district was created on July 6th of 1965 by ordinance from the Cache County Commission. There was a petition of signatures of 25% of property holders in all areas of the county, excluding Logan, that were signed, and we actually have those signature pages, those packets at a meeting a couple months ago, so we've actually all seen the signatures. And Bryson was able to pull those up for us.
Can I ask how many?
How many signatures? I don't remember the exact number, but they were separated by city and the unincorporated county. In the minutes of the commission, it says that in excess of 25%, which is the legal requirement at the time to put that into service. On July 8th, in the Herald Journal, there was a legal notice. And that legal notice is really small in this, which is about how big it was in real life. And right under the bid for chicken feed, there was a notification that the organization of the Cache County Fire District had been put into place. In the minutes of the Cache County Commission, in these 2 pages, you can see that right under an eye examination for Ruth Peck was approved. And somebody was going to remodel their office. The ordinance creating the Cache County Fire District was approved by the commission. And the publication date's July 8th, and here's the ordinance. I can get you copies of that if you want. And then this is the actual ordinance, or the notification that was put in the paper on July 8th. 2nd of 1966, this appeared in the Herald Journal, and it described the Cache County Fire District and the zones that were included in that district. It's a little hard to read here, but zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. There were actually 9 at the time. It expanded out to 12 or 11 after that. And in that same paper, there were photographs of each department for each city. Thought that was kind of interesting, especially when you look at their gear and their vehicles. The old Army coats that they used as fire coats were kind of impressive. So that's a little bit just on the background of the formation, the legalities of it. There were a couple things that weren't done at the time. It doesn't appear that the clerk filed, Bryson knows this better than I do, but filed something with the Lieutenant Governor's office, and we had to go back and clean that stuff up. And that included writing the bylaws. So I think each of you have received copies of the bylaws, and what I'm going to talk about next comes directly from there. So the district board responsibilities, they're found in Article 3, and they're to ensure the following. One, the effectiveness. The board must ensure effective district operations. When we talk about district operations, that's essentially the fire service. This board is essentially mandated to make sure that we have appropriate fire service in the district. And there's a couple ways you do that: developing, communicating district mission statement, appointing and electing those officers identified, and that's you guys. And there's some other officers that you need to identify in the next few meetings, clerks and those kind of things. And then being familiar with emerging technology affecting district operations. Again, operations is an important part because it is the fire service and how we fight fires. Need to be efficient. So regularly review and rebid contracts every 5 years. And these are pretty standard for special service districts. Review budget to actual reports, ensure bank statements are being reviewed, and encourage innovation and cost savings among employees. Right now there are no employees, so that's not a big issue. Comply with state directives, so board member training, I think Mr. Jorgensen, is that the right name? It's not the right name. Larry.
Larry
Jacobson.
Jacobson, okay, yeah.
I'm gonna give you an R. So he did his special service training. We saw that certificate come through. And then grandma request. There's overachievers among us. Grandma training for records.
He was the last of all of us, so.
But he was the first that said it. Not that we needed it said.
I'm gonna find it.
All right. Ethics and nepotism, of course, these are just state law things. And then duties, we did talk about a chief administrative officer.
I only sent it to you because I didn't think you'd believe I took it.
I would. There's a chief administrative officer identified in the bylaws. And remember, you as a board can change the bylaws anytime you want, as long as everybody votes on it. But as we initially worked through these bylaws, we wanted to keep them really simple so that you could flesh it out later as things progressed, so that you would determine the operation. The chief administrative officer is not a fire chief. Essentially, based on the duties that he or she would have at this time, it's mainly doing the legwork for the board. So getting the contracts ready, making sure they get signatures, and in this case, make recommendations to the board regarding rules and regulations, budgetary considerations, and other matters. So just an advisor to the board. I don't see him as an employee. I see it more as a contract kind of thing that doesn't take a lot of money. It does say in A, act as chief administrative officer of the district and the highest member in the operations chain of command. I don't know what that means. I don't think you want this guy to be supervising all the city departments. I don't see where that would make any sense. Not the way we have it set up right now. Could happen as things progress, but again, that's not what we're recommending, and it doesn't say fire chief anywhere. So he's just there to do your legwork. There are a couple things in the contracts, and again, I'm stepping back to kind of explain how we're set up right now. So in the original contract from 1965, it had the following points. One, all the cities in these zones agreed to fight fires in all their designated zones. The county agreed to pay the city an amount each year to be used for firefighting and controlling fires and to purchase fire equipment. The city agreed to coordinate all firefighting programs with the county, and in this case it was fire director, and we'll meet to discuss firefighting problems and follow recommendations of the district fire director in the maintenance, operation, fire control, training, and fire prevention within the zone. So in this case, it was just the fire director was to coordinate these activities, training, operations, that kind of stuff. Number 4, the city will respond to other cities when requested, in kind of a mutual aid item there. The city will bear all costs for firefighting and fire prevention except for the sum the county pays, and the city will be responsible to operate and maintain fire equipment and also be responsible for the training of their own voluntary fire personnel. The city also agrees to cooperate with other communities within the county in training programs. So in number 5, and current, kind of the way it is still, is the cities have their own budget for fire, they pay their own fire department, provide their own equipment. Number 6, the city agrees, did I jump? No. The city agrees to inform the residents in their zone how to place a fire call. So actually in that article in the paper in 1966, they had the phone numbers for people to call to report a fire, and it was usually the fire chief in that zone. So there was no 911 service, and it was probably one of those 4-digit plus 1-letter phone numbers.
It was a party line back then, yeah.
Sure, if there's a fire, and somebody would call somebody. And then fire equipment purchased by the county will be stored in a heated building, and that's kind of carried on through. But the key here is management of the individual city departments was at the discretion of the city officials and the city fire chief. So there was no combined single-handed fire department. It was all the coordination of all the cities. So in 1973, there was a contract between Cache County, Nibley, Millville Province, River Heights, North Logan, and Logan City. And you can see these are the cities that are still contracting for fire service. And at that time, those cities were contracted between the county and Logan City, so that Logan City provided fire service in all of that zone 7 that I showed you on the map. And in that contract, each city and Cache County were to pay Logan City a given sum for fire protection. So those contracts, although they switched a little bit through time, they were in place pretty early in the system. So our current funding model for the fire service in the district is through municipal taxes through the cities, a general fund property tax with the county general fund, contracts between cities and county and between cities and cities, and then there's other revenue including ambulance and wildland that come into play. Again, all of these are at the discretion of the city. Now let me talk about ambulance for just a second. There are 3 ambulance services in the valley. They operate outside of the fire district purview. Smithfield has one, Logan has one, and Cache County has one. Smithfield, of course, on the north end, Logan City pretty much through the central area, and then Cache County in the south. And as a funding source or revenue source or expenditure, that's at the responsibility of those 3 agencies. But again, it is outside the purview of the fire district. Those ambulance services are state licenses. They're state regulated. The advantage of having them with a fire service is you don't have ambulance people sitting around when there's a fire, and you don't have fire people sitting around when there's a medical call. That overlap reduces downtime, and you use the same person for multiple things rather than having them sit around. So there's efficiencies, there's absolute efficiencies in a combined service. And I don't think that's something we want to move away from. At the same time, there is revenue generated from those, and it would come into play in any funding decisions that you might want to make in the future. So we looked at the budgets, and Susie from Zions Financial will cover a lot of this in a few minutes. But these are the budgets, the per capita breakdown, and I added a per household column because when you look at per capita, the number's fairly low compared to what per household is, and my math is pretty simple. I took per capita and multiplied it by 3.2, which is the average number of people in a house, and then you get kind of a household cost for the fire service, and it ranges from $0 for Cornish up to $299 or about $300 for North Logan, which is a huge range. And then the other one you might want to note is Cache County unincorporated is also $0 because there's no municipal service tax for the unincorporated area to provide fire service. And then again, there's a huge range of difference. There's, you know, Smithfield's $256, River Heights $211, Lewiston's $58, Newton's $47. So a really broad range of costs for the citizens that are receiving the service. That comes into play here. So let's look at an example. Nibley contracts with Hiram for fire service. And so they pay him money, and Hiram says, we'll provide the service. When there's a fire in Nibley, Hiram responds, no question. And Cache County responds, and Paradise responds, and Logan responds, and Mendon responds, and Wellsville responds. But at the same time, none of those other departments are paid. Okay? If there's a fire in Cache County in the unincorporated area, say it's in Hiram zone, in zone 8, these cities will respond, Mendon, Logan, Hiram, Paradise, and Wellsville. And Cache County pays all of these cities to fight fires in the unincorporated area, again, using property tax, not municipal services tax. And these cities respond. So each of them are receiving payment for that. But again, those are general fund dollars, so the citizens of the unincorporated area aren't paying for that service, it's general fund. If you look at Newton, you'll have Clarkston, Trenton, Smithfield, Cache County, and Lewiston on the first alarm. And units from each of those cities will respond to Newton. And there's no money transferred either way. Newton doesn't contract with any of these cities. They don't contract back financially. But what if Clarkston and Trenton don't show up? What if nobody's around? Then Lewiston, Newton, and Smithfield carry that response in Cache County. But what if Newton doesn't show up? Maybe it's the middle of the day and nobody's around. Lewiston and Smithfield and the county then bear the cost of fire suppression in that town. Now, obviously, there's not a lot of calls up there, and that doesn't happen very frequently. But we have had in the last couple months several fires where departments haven't shown up because nobody's around during the day. So we have to make it up through calling in other units, other cities to help respond. Let me show you this video, and I want to talk a minute about fire response and why quick response is important. This takes about just over 3 minutes. There's no sound, so if you'll bear with me, it takes just a second. There it goes. So this is a test that UL did, Underwriters Laboratory. They had 2 fires, exactly the same size, same fuel load. The one on the left was furniture that existed prior to about mid-70s. We call it legacy furniture. It's made out of hardwood, it's made out of natural materials, and it burns a certain way. The one on the right is furniture that's in our homes today. So you can see there's a candle on the couch by the pillow, and on the one on the left you can see a little bit of fire burning right now. And that's the legacy stuff, that's the natural materials. They lit it 54 seconds ago. This is how much fire you have. Now the one on the right, at 1 minute, we're starting to see a little bit of smoke. This is the furniture in your house. And it's going to grow a lot faster. This is, like I said, synthetic materials. It's everything in there is built of some form of oil. So now you see that cloud at the top, the smoke at the top is banking down and it's starting to get heat. It's 2 minutes in. Where's your fire department right now?
Well, it kept grandma's drapes.
So what that smoke is just unburned particles. It's fuel, essentially. It's an oil-based fuel that's getting hot. And when oil gets hot and gets mixed with the right amount of air, then it burns. So that smoke is actually going to start to burn. And we're 3 minutes into the fire. Now you see it start to ignite. Now look at the ground on the one on the right. That smoke coming off the ground is off-gassing by the fuel, or by the material, and pretty quick that's going to ignite. And now the whole room is under what we call flashover. That entire room is about 18 to 1900 degrees, and it's 3 minutes and 50 seconds into the fire. Sorry, I'm going to back that one up. 3 minutes and 50 seconds, so less than 4 minutes, you have one room entirely engulfed. And the fire's not going to stop with one room. So this is why seconds are important to firefighters, while we need to get there fast. Now the video on the left, had we let this play out, it takes about 30 minutes to ignite like that. So the fuels of today are not the same, the fires of today are not the same as the fires that our fathers fought. It's a completely different time sequence. It's a time limit that we don't have time to gather people and wait and then finally get there when people are getting there, or we're losing property. You know, we've had a lot of fires that could have been kept small, but it just takes too long to get there. So let me show you this map. On the left, this is a 4-minute response map. So if we want to get to a fire within 4 minutes, this is the area of coverage that we have in Cache Valley in the fire district. And it's from Smithfield to Hiram. That's the only blue area, and blue is where you can get in 4 minutes. And this one on the right is a zoomed up version of that map. So the map on the right is, if you live in the blue area, the fire department can get to you within 4 minutes. So that flashover fire that happened at 4 minutes, that's where we're going to be. So we have some pretty big holes here. We have a big hole in Hyde Park, and there's probably 10,000 people up in this area, plus a ton of commercial stuff. And then we have a big hole between Providence, Millville, and Nibley that it just takes too long to get to a fire. Okay, here's the 8-minute response map. So if you look at the volunteer departments, Lewis and Trenton, Newton, Wellsville, Mendon, the blue is the area they can get to in 8 minutes. So you could see how big the fire could get. And then if you look at the area between Smithfield and Hiram, it's pretty much covered within 8 minutes. I think almost everything in that whole zone is covered in the 8-minute line. If you go up, this small map up here is Richmond. So if you look over here on the left side, that assumes nobody's in Richmond, no firefighters. And if you add firefighters, which we now have there 12 hours a day, then during the day, we've got a much better coverage up here, and in the evening, it's less. So you can see just filling that one station really expands the response area that we can get to quickly. Okay, any questions on any of that? So here's the issues we got to resolve as a fire board and a fire district. We need to ensure adequate response to all fires. That means trained firefighters with the right equipment getting there in the right amount of time. And the fire board or the city municipality or the county council determines what level of response we have, how fast we can get there, how many people show up, how long it takes. That's your fire board responsibility. Regardless of all the legal stuff and the meeting kind of stuff, the fire board responsibility is to ensure adequate response to fires. And then the second thing I think we need to look at is equal and appropriate funding for the fire service throughout the district. as I showed you in that earlier table, there's a vast, broad range of funding that's paying for the service that's coming from all entities. And I don't think that it's, I don't know if fair is the right word, because I don't like using that word. But there's just huge discrepancies in what people are paying for versus what they're receiving. And granted, I acknowledge that some people are paying more and some people are providing more than they're receiving. That's a given. But at the same time, others are paying less and providing less. So I'm not here to tell you how it should be funded. I'm not here to tell you, I can tell you what I think the service should be, what I think the improvements need to be. But I'm not here to tell you what to do. You've got to make those decisions as informed decisions, and you've got to take into account the taxpayer and what they can pay for and the service they need to receive. And that's, unfortunately, that's all on you. I'm happy to give you technical advice and how long things take and how many people it takes and where some of the holes are, but we're struggling. I can't say it enough. The fire service is struggling, especially in the small departments. They're underfunded. They can't pay for turnouts. They can't pay for air packs. The cost of this equipment is outrageous. It's completely outrageous. But with the underfunding, we're living on luck. And luck is a bad plan. And it's truly, I know you guys hear this from emergency service people. We say it all the time. But the reality is we're living on luck, and sooner or later, somebody's going to pay for it. And I don't think anybody wants that. I know the firefighters don't. They spend an inordinate amount of time volunteering their time for classes, for training, for meetings, everything else they do, and they give their all. But if we can't get them the resources we need, we're doing a huge disservice. So we've asked Zions Bank to do a financial audit, essentially, of where everything's funded from. So she's looked at your budgets. She'll explain a lot of that. This is not to say, the number she shows you is not to say this is what you have to do. It doesn't mean you have to apply a tax across the board or anything like that. That's not why we're here. All we're showing you with this study is this is what the cost is. And she's got some numbers on what that means. But it's just another data point. It's not to say, again, it's not to say this is what you have to do. We just want to inform you and show you what the true cost of the fire service right now in the fire district is, and then we can go from there. So any questions about any of that stuff? I want to ask you just one more question. You saw the video. If that's your house, what would you want? How fast would you want people to get there? So, all right. Yeah.
Thank you. If everyone would turn on their microphones for those that are viewing via YouTube, please. Oh, you guys got yours on. Perfect. Okay. Now we have Susie. Is it Decker? Excuse me, Becker? Susie Becker, if you would please address us and the presentation you have from the study that you conducted.
Use the mouse.
Okay. Is that how I move it down? Okay. Thank you. That was great history for me as well. It's been a great project to work on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. So now let's look at some numbers just for a minute. Okay, so here on our first slide, just as a background for all of us, this is how we currently have service provision. And you can see all the cities in the county listed on the left, the fire provider, and the EMS. So for EMS, as was stated just a minute ago, we really only have 3 providers. We've got Smithfield, Cache County, and Logan. But for when we're going to fire provision, we have Hiram providing it to cities other than itself, but it doesn't do the EMS. You can see that those cities where Hiram provides it, such as Millville, then when we move over to EMS, they move to Cache County for that. The cities in the middle column that are clear white, we didn't highlight, those have chosen to provide their own fire services, but then they have contracted with, either Smithfield or Logan or someone to do their EMS. And I think it's important to kind of understand this, how this is a web here, to try and untangle this, but it's interesting too because there's really different levels of service provision. What Clarkston may be providing, just to use an example, may be very different than what Hiram may be providing in Hiram or something like that, the service levels. And so just keep that in mind as we look at some of these numbers. So this was the scope of the study initially, and then in the last few slides, I'm going to walk back from it just a little. But at this point, service providers do not change. That doesn't change at all. We've just assumed that everyone would still keep providing the service the way it is now. We're just looking at the cost. What is the financial feasibility of this and what's it going to cost? Service levels do not change. We have a little bit in there on that at the end. Logan City's not included in the analysis. All other areas are included. And as we figure the expenses here, we're going to use the EMS revenues to offset the expenses because we do get some revenue in. And wildland fire, ambulance, all of that. We'll bring those revenues in, but we will not take out the Logan ones because they will keep providing services where they do. Okay, so here we go. This is where I spent the majority of the time on this, I think, was talking to every single one of these communities. So on the left, you see the cities listed in alphabetical order here in your county, and just a review of the fire provider EMS. What's interesting about some of these is that these cities, besides providing it to their own community, they are also paid to provide it to areas of the unincorporated county. Clarkston would be a good example. Clarkston does its own fire provision, and yes, in the fourth column over, it does provide some services to other areas of the unincorporated county. And so when it will be given a revenue, given some payment from the county for that. We'll actually take that out. We'll count for that in the calculation so we don't double count here. But anyways, you can see the expenses. Now the expenses and the EMS expense, not all communities could break out their EMS expense. Some of them had to give it to us all as one. So the EMS expense there is understated. The total, it may be included in some of the total expense. In the end, it doesn't matter because we just add them together for what are your total expenses. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, and I can actually go back and just add this one up with you. So if you add on the very bottom right-hand column, the 5.7 million and the 229,000, you'd be at about 5.9 million. And here, when you look here at all the expenses in that second column, there's your 5.9 million. In addition, we had Cache County that pays about $4 million a year, but that cost to the county is somewhat offset by the revenues that it receives, and all of the other communities had about 1.3 million in revenues that they received, which are EMS revenues, wildland fire, that type of thing. So the net expenses that we have seen in the most recent year are 7.4 million that we would need to cover in a fire district if that were to occur. Though that's just based on what has happened historically, and so it's that current level of service. So we were given, working with the county, the taxable value of the county less Logan at that 9.8 billion. Operating expenses, you just saw that on the previous slide. There's your 9.925. Take away the ambulance revenues again, and you're back to the 7.4 million. It would take a rate of about 0.000754. Anyway, to cover that cost, that means taking that taxable value times that rate would generate revenue of about 7.4 million. Now, the maximum rate for a fire district is 0.0008, and so that's coming in just pretty close, but under there, we see a lot of communities around there. It's about the average we see. But you can also add on, in addition to that, any bond levy amount. And you'll see when I show you a comparative slide at the end that a lot of communities, fire districts, have added on a bond levy in addition. So that's kind of where we are right now. But as we project this going forward, and this is, I say, we're backtracking just a little bit from exactly what we've seen in the past. We're going to add in a little bit more cost in here. But first of all, we assumed that you'd have taxable value growth of 8% a year. We base that on what we saw historically. Assumes operating costs grow at 5% per year. We assumed an $11 million bond in 2026, and for right now, we used a 20-year term, 4% interest. That's going to depend, of course, when you issue that and what goes on in the bond markets, which have been a little crazy. But that is where we are, I think, looking to reduce some of these response times, and the chief can probably speak more to that. Capital cost there, and an additional capital cost of $3.2 million per year. So if we try to build those in to this model as well, plus the county contributes a $2.5 million fund balance to get them off to a start, because it would be zero right now. This would allow us to have, building out in the model, 100 days cash on hand by 2030. But our balance is decreasing somewhat. At some point, you would probably have to put a little bit of a bond levy on there in addition. If the growth, were to be slower, not at this rate, here's some of your risks. The taxable value grows more slowly than 8% per year. Bond costs are greater than 4%, so your payment would be bigger. Operating costs would increase by more than 5% per year. Opportunities, though, if your taxable value grows faster than 8% per year, then you're going to get more revenue in there, and that's going to be a help to you. Bond costs go down, the interest rates. One of the things that was brought up, and I'm not going to comment on it, just to say that it was brought up in several instances in interviews, because I talked to every single city, and they were all great. What a great community. But efficiencies in service delivery can be achieved. People asked about that and said, we're not really maybe as efficient as we could be with all of these little pieces that you saw in the first jigsaw puzzle slide. An alternative to is to enact a municipal services tax rate for these areas of the unincorporated county that aren't paying in a city already. So what would be the impacts? That's always seems like what councils want to know. If you have a single family home and it has a $500,000 market value, you've got the primary residential exemption, so the taxable value is $275. If we went to the full 0.008, it's about $220 payment per year. Okay. Now, let's look at some of these service level comparisons. The chief kind of got into this just a little bit here. But when you look at, so here's the taxable value in the second column over that adds up to that $9.8 billion that we saw earlier. Here's all your taxable value. So using the 0.008, these would be the taxes that would be generated, which is the 7.4, which we were saying we had to, that was our mark, our target earlier. So then I took the current operating costs for each community, and I subtracted from it any revenue that it got, whether it's from whatever source they may have from some revenue coming in, wildland fire, whatever it may be, and said, okay, here are your costs that you really have left to cover. And so in this case, you're generating this compared to this. And you can see I just did it as a percentage here, and this last number is the percentage of what your cost is compared to what you generate. So those of you who are up here, like North Logan, would come out about even. It's about its cost, it's about what it generates. It's kind of straight across the board. For there, Smithfield's pretty close, Mesa Advantage. So where the real issue is, the current operating costs, less revenues, for the unincorporated county are $2.7 million. Taxes generated about $567,000. I think that's an interesting number as we go forward. Chief already shared this. Different service levels, cost per capita. Obviously, some cities have more commercial in them and others, and so they're going to have more costs. It makes the cost per capita look higher. But you are dealing with very, very different service levels as you go through here, which made it interesting. Finally, the last slide, we pulled these tax rates from other communities. Here was your average. You'd be right in there, 0.0073. Are some higher than 0.0008? Yep, because they've added on that bond levy, which you can do as well. And so, yes, you're right close to the average. And those are the numbers. Do you have any questions on those numbers?
Yes. What is the $11 million bond?
You want him to speak now?
Those were estimates on purchasing equipment, buying the new stations, that kind of stuff. So again, the bonding is up to your discretion. It's rebuilding the station in Paradise, the one in Newton.
Oh, the pictures you showed us last time?
Yeah, and then
School and
an old school and an older school.
yeah.
Yeah, and then if we look at putting a station in Hyde Park or Nibley, that's where the bonding would come in.
to complete that service map that you showed us of the response times being more equitable or
Yes.
whatever. Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out, and maybe I'm behind on this, but, so like North Logan, we currently pay Logan City to cover our fire. And in that previous slide where it talks about, I guess I'm trying to figure out if that were to switch to the county providing that service, how's that accounted for in like these numbers? I guess it's the one previous where it's talking about tax revenue and.
Yeah, let me clarify a little bit.
Okay.
When you say the county providing that service, it wouldn't be Cache County, it'd be the fire district,
Okay, sorry.
right?
Yes.
We got it, I'm gonna
We
say that a
have to
lot, but
stick to
we
the
have to
number, I get
distinguish
it.
that. So if the fire district did some kind of funding mechanism, then the fire district would pay for that amount if the contract continued through Logan City.
So the fire district would step into that and then contract with Logan City to provide the same service?
Right.
Is that the idea?
So the fire district would have to take over the contracts for those areas that are paying the tax, if that's the way it ends up going.
So it doesn't presume any, change with respect to, like, who's in the fire stations?
No.
Or, and we don't have any proposed changes to, say, capital outside of the Hyde Park and possibly Nibley stations? Is that kind of?
Yeah, and that's just, to me, this is what needs to happen. Whether it's funded or not, that's a different story. But it doesn't assume any changes in service or essentially service providers at this time. I don't think, if I was running the North Logan Station, I can't say that it would cost any less to have 4 people there all the time. People are people, equipment's equipment, so I don't see where the cost would be less changing any of that stuff.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
It's probably a hard one to answer, but a lot of our fire district is built upon volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm going to pick on Mendon because we're having less volunteers there. So the cost is still high, and that's represented in your 5810. But I worry as we rely more and more as the county grows on volunteer, where that's going to put us, because those guys are paying a lot, but getting little. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mendon's a little bit different situation. There should be pointed out, these services are not all the same level either. Smithfield's providing paramedic transport. Mendon as a volunteer agency doesn't. So the services required there are less, and their budget's a little bit different because they cover a large area of unincorporated. So the county actually pays quite a bit into their budget, plus what they already pay. Between Mendon and Paradise, we're about matching their budget 50-50. So half of their budget comes from us, and that's all included in that total. So again, when we start talking about efficiencies, all this cross-city and cross-county city funding that kind of goes in a circle and is accounted for in the circle, some of that will go away. Yeah.
Is there a way to assess the level of service or quality to distinguish, like, whether you have an engine with a ladder versus a guy in a Dalmatian and a big bucket of water?
Guy in a pickup with an extinguisher? Oh yeah, we know it very well.
Is there a way to quantify it on a spreadsheet?
Yeah, there's some stuff you can do to quantify that, but the quantification might not be an actual depiction of the service. I'll fight fires with Clarkson any day. They're volunteer, they're great people, they're well-trained, they're aggressive, they do a great job. Sometimes they're not there during the day. Most of these volunteer departments are in the same way. And as this evolves out, as we grow, what are we now, 140,000 people? As we grow, all of these small communities are bedroom communities of somewhere else. Nobody typically is working there during the day. And that service has to come from somewhere. So if you beef up the staffing in Smithfield, knowing that Newton may not be there, but we've got a couple extra guys in Smithfield that can go out and get things started. You know, we can start to create some efficiencies there. There are no bad departments in this county. In fact, I told you before, I teach fire tactics throughout the state, and I know what a bad fire department looks like. And I would put any of these departments up against anybody in the state at any time. The struggle is getting new people and getting them through 7 months of trade training 3 nights a week for 4 hours a night that they donate, and having them there 24/7, having them leave their family at the middle of a barbecue or a birthday party, all the struggles that volunteers go through. I'm not sure how long that model's going to keep going. And if you look across the country, departments almost always move from volunteer to a combination, like you see at Hiram right now. You've got a combination, and then they'll move into more paid staff than volunteer staff until it usually transfers over to full career. Yeah.
Can you tell me, I don't understand the number for the unincorporated county, 475?
So what they did was they took our county budget, the 3.9 million, and that goes to my department, and they divided it by the population of the unincorporated. So that's assuming, is that correct?
We took away the revenues, though, that you get in
Okay.
as well. But what you spent, less the revenues to see what the true cost was.
Yeah, divided by the population of unincorporated.
After we took out what the county spent and all of the separate, I'll just up here. So all of the county's money does not go to unincorporated county. I mean, well, it does through the cities, but eventually goes there. But sometimes you're paid to the city, collection, or someone who's providing that service. So we accounted for that, and then, yeah, we did divide it by the population in the unincorporated county. And it's just expensive compared to the others, as you can see,
So
on a
does that
per capita
mean-
basis.
Does that mean the unincorporated area residents would be paying,
Nope,
well, could you go back to that slide?
Cost to provide service.
There-
that's just what it's costing.
Numbers as a percentage? Yeah, so that one, 481%. Well, 481% for the unincorporated area, does that mean that the new cost would be almost 5 times what the current cost is?
Not for them, because you'd have, well, 2 thoughts. You would have the same rate, which way we're going back here. You would have the same tax rate all across the whole area, everything except for Logan. But if you were to enact a municipal services tax rate just for the unincorporated county, it would be pretty high to cover what you're covering. With the taxable value, you have to cover it.
So you're saying that the unincorporated area residents would have to pay 4.8 times as much as they're paying now? Is that what that means?
That would only be if you
Well-
had the unincorporated pay for the entire budget of
Yeah.
Cache County Fire.
Yeah, I think you'd have to just run the numbers. I don't know, that would work that way. It would be more.
All those people that we're sending out to all these other cities, right?
Yeah, it includes the
Yeah, I
people
mean,
in,
It's that mixture.
in
of
Richmond.
everything.
and-
So it's
So-
really not a true look as to what's actually unincorporated costs.
Correct.
So
Yeah, did that include capital costs? Because that's the part
it
that
engines
goes out.
everything.
Because if we took capital costs out of that and only looked at operational, it would probably be more accurate.
That 7.4 number doesn't include the 3.2 million a year in capital costs, and it doesn't include the $11 million bond. No, let's back up here. Okay, why can't I do this backwards? Okay, it's this number, this one right here. Here's your 7.4 million. This is before, this is like your net operating expenses, your NOI is before you put in your capital cost. But right now, you can't really say it's that increase of what they're now paying because they're not paying anything specifically with the municipal services tax rate. You know, they're just paying as part of the whole county general fund. So,
So can you go back to that slide that has the percentages?
uh-huh,
Because I'm still trying to figure this out.
yeah.
And maybe it's easier if we start with like North Logan, because North
Okay.
Logan, the numbers are almost the same.
Yeah, let me explain it. And this is not what they'd be paying. It's just showing you your ratio. So everyone worries when you do something like this that there may be winners and losers, that some might get more benefit than others. Others might be supporting others or another community. And so here is the taxable value as recently listed that Wes was great, got me the latest on this of each community. So if you multiply in this column times 0.008, this is what would be generated in this area. if we go back to the sheet that shows what their total costs are, and I'm going to go back up to it just for a minute. Okay, so here's, well, this one, no, probably here's the best. This has their total costs here for all of these areas, plus then we add in on this one, the county ones, less the revenue. So there's your 4 million less that revenue. So I brought it down just a little bit. Okay, that's what the county is paying for these services. So then if we come back down here and we take each community's cost, which we saw listed there with the expenses that they gave us, their total cost less their revenue, and we said, okay, how does, and don't even look at the last column for a minute. Okay, just look at these and say, okay, look, in Minden, well, Minden said was different. Millville, they're generating $189,000 based on their taxable value, yet right now their total costs are only showing as $79,000. Most of these communities are showing as less than their costs than what they would generate under a point, than what they would generate under a 0.000 rate. So where does that extra money go? Because this has got to come out even with this. It's going to the unincorporated county because this is their cost that we saw on that previous slide, and this is all based on their taxable value. That's all they're generating.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying now. So what you're saying is if we were to impose a levy at 0.008 and how many zeros was it?
3.
3 zeros, 0.0008. That would generate $2.7 million in, or $567,000 in the unincorporated areas.
Yes.
Which is
yes,
not 5 times, but 1/5 of what is currently being expended by the county.
Yeah.
But that number's way off because the county fire department is currently operating as a district and serving way beyond the boundaries of the unincorporated area.
Okay.
Is that correct? Is that how we got to that?
Yes.
Okay. So then if we looked at Amalga, for example, all the way to the top of that, they have a very small budget, $15,000, but if we were to impose that same levy, the same amount for everybody, it would, in their case, end up generating about 4 times as much as they're currently spending. But that, in the same way, does not take into account that, for example, we provide from the county fire department through the district capital equipment, training, services.
Yeah, now it's a little different because they get their service from Smithfield.
Yeah, so that one, well, but we could count those from them as well. Okay. Okay, I think that answers my question. So what this would do is this would make it so that everybody's paying the same rate, which might make it in some cases be less than what they were paying before, and in some cases be more than what they were paying before.
Well, if you think cities are going to, what are they going to do? They already have it through their general fund tax rate, their property taxes. Are they going to pull back these amounts, or are they just going to have this in addition? I mean, I don't know that we know that. But cities often don't pull back. They have a need for the money. But yeah, it's just trying to show you that the rest of these cities then would be, I think, chipping in a little bit for this area. That's all it was trying to do. Yeah.
Question. So if we're talking taxable value, and I'm going to take Hiram as an example, I don't know how many schools you have in Hiram? 4? Plus church houses. So Hiram, as you look at it, is a taxable value, but the equipment needed to fight those non-taxable pieces of real estate would mean that there needs to be bigger or better equipment for those size of things, correct? Is that taken in this analysis, or how do you look at that?
No, it's current service.
You're in the same boat.
There are bigger pieces of equipment in the area. Smithfield has a ladder truck. North Logan has one. Logan has one. Hiram now has one. So again, this is part of the inequity of it. Hiram's bought this, and we fortunately we helped pay for it, but Hiram bought this ladder truck that's gonna be used in Paradise and Wellsville and Mendon and Logan, and it's gonna be used everywhere. But Hiram's bearing the cost for that. So.
Why doesn't Cornish have any numbers?
They don't pay anybody.
And they don't get service
They get service from Lewiston
for free?
for free. They're just working it.
They buy vintage furniture with their extra money.
Yeah.
It doesn't burn as fast.
It's all hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
If I was them, I wouldn't be complaining. The hand-me-downs.
Well, their question is, well, if I'm in the fire district, why isn't the fire district paying for it?
That's right.
So I have a question, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around all this. So let's say that Nibley, being in that zone that doesn't quite have the response times that are ideal, says, you know what, if the fire district's gonna pick up the cost, I'm gonna go and negotiate with Logan to get a higher contract, right? But maybe better service. But that cost is now spread across the entire district?
Well,
How does that work exactly?
This
Because
starts to get into some legal questions as far as who can contract with who. If they are in the district, are they obligated to get out of the district to make those contracts? Unfortunately, we have an attorney here who is our fire district attorney. Fortunately, I don't know if she's ready for that question, but.
Hi.
Um,
Would you please, if you'd like to address us, can you please come to the microphone and introduce yourself? Thank you. I don't know if you'd like to address us, but we're asking you to address us.
My name is Amy Hughey, and I'm the new district attorney. It's kind of interesting what you guys are dealing with here because, like some of the other fire districts I work for, this is not an issue. Everybody's in to the pot, and then it's all covered. So I would say if you're, if that's the case, that of looking at wanting to try to provide equal service across, that having just one entity, the district being the negotiating body, that would make the most sense. Frankly, that's what the district is set up for. Well, I'm guessing back in 1965 that's what it was set up for, because that's what I've seen, all the other fire districts. I work for Weber Fire District, Central Box Elder Fire District, the Mountain Green, that fire service district. And that's really what they're all set up for, is how do we supply equal fire protection across the whole entire area. So I would say, really, you want to have the district negotiating those contracts instead of each one of the little cities.
So for the cities then to go negotiate, then they would actually have to then pull out.
Yeah.
Go through that process of pulling out of that district for them to go negotiate it by themselves, right?
Which would take a ballot initiative and over here.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so in North Logan's case, for example, who's contracting with Smithfield.
Logan.
Or with Logan, sorry. Yeah, the district has to have a critical mass of cities, otherwise.
Yeah, what's the point?
The smaller ones are left holding the bag, and
yeah.
It becomes unaffordable, right? So, but you don't compel them to be in the district. But what you just said, so it would require a ballot initiative to opt out of the district or to get into the district?
To opt out.
To opt out.
So by default, you're automatically.
Well, right now they're all of the.
And because you're all in, you would automatically pay into that via taxes because you're part of the district.
Well, if you go.
So you wouldn't be contracting with, like North Logan wouldn't be contracting with Logan anymore at that point.
Well, it depends on how, my understanding is it depends on which way you decide to go. If you decide to keep moving along the way that you're currently moving along, which I don't really get the impression that that's what you want to do, is the status quo. But if you're looking at wanting to change things so that you have the district who's taking care of this, and really what you're wanting to look at in the future and how far down that road is to have the district owning all of the equipment and owning the fire stations and having those employees under the district's umbrella instead of like the individual cities, but the cities being a part of that board to administer, you know, how to move forward, what the money should be spent on, and what capital projects you should be looking at, like what fire trucks to be building, or, you know, how many personnel you need to be able to provide that uniform service across the whole entire Cache County, excluding Logan.
I'm just curious, like, how does that account for, like, Logan, North Logan, we own several trucks on our own, and they're relatively new, as I understand it, relative to other cities in this valley. How do we account for that, like, the capital that the cities own going in? You know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm picturing telling North Logan residents, we've got to buy a new truck for Cornish.
So what I would recommend is, we understand that this is a transition time. And I don't think that because that equipment will still be used in North Logan primarily, I don't think there's any rush to say, let's transfer ownership of any of this stuff. Just let it stay in North Logan until it ages out, and then have the district buy the new one. And I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but I just don't see any sense in pushing a bunch of money around just to change names on a title when that equipment, those buildings and everything will be used as they are currently being used.
So, Chief, has someone put together a 10-year plan of when the transition is complete and what that might look like, even if it's a napkin version?
We're not quite sure what that's going to look like yet until we get some decisions on which direction to go. I mean, we can make plans. I can make some really good plans.
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, because I think it's easier for people to get on board if they have a vision.
If it's a move forward, then yes.
Yeah.
We can come up with that. If it's a die an ugly death, then it's a different plan.
So, and I guess I'm confused, what decisions need to be made by the council at this point, and what decisions need to be made by the fire board?
So the attorney's office is going to do a presentation to the council as far as the legal obligations of Cache County. They've been working on that. When are you doing that?
That is a good question.
As soon as they get, they're pretty much ready, so probably then shortly. And that's the obligation to the council. The decisions from the fire board are, do we just keep going forward the way we are? Do we change anything? How do we account for growth? How do we account for funding? Those kind of things. Again, I recommend that we, as far as operationally, we don't change anything. But what are we going to do going forward? And that's a fire board decision. And then if you do start to look at the taxing model, then there's a couple things that have to happen. One is, if the fire board wants to levy taxes, then they have to become elected board members. Otherwise, the county council will have to authorize the tax for the board. So that could take 3 to 4 years to cycle through and work that all out. This is not an overnight thing. So there are steps that have to happen depending on which way people want to go. And I think just this background information might be enough for people to start understanding the dynamics of the problem. And it's incredibly complicated. And there are a lot of small details that really affect this. For instance, the ambulance issue. You know, all those details need to be accounted for when we start making decisions. And we need to get into a room and start asking the questions, the what ifs, the what's going to be a better plan. Or again, we don't change anything. That's an option. In my opinion, it's not a good option because I don't see a lot of the cities being able to afford the costs that are coming up as individual cities. And when we lose cities, like when Richmond went out of business, and nothing against Smithfield, but it did increase the response time, which is why we asked to put 2 people up there. Those are some of the problems that are happening when we start to lose departments. So there are decisions that need to be made. I'm not sure, I couldn't tell you right now that I could ask all the questions that need answered. And as we develop it and kind of get a plan moving forward, then we can start formulating those. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the challenge for me is I'm trying to put myself in the spot where people conceived of this in 1964. And I think it meant equal service for equal cost throughout the county, except for Logan. And that's fine. Maybe it's because Logan was so on top of stuff, they didn't need any help.
So there's an interest, if I can jump in.
Please.
There's an interesting thing in the articles in the paper, or in the minutes of the commission notes. Logan City said they don't want to get involved with it because they don't want to be subservient to the county. And so they wanted nothing to do with
Nibley
it.
City says the same.
So that was in the minutes, and that's how it turned out. So, sorry, didn't mean to.
Thank you, that's an excellent addition. But it is a challenge for me to figure out where we need to go, because we had this vision, I think, in 1964 of what we wanted to be, but it never happened, so things just kind of happened on their own, and cities took it upon themselves to take care of what they thought was an adequate level of service for a reasonable cost, and so we all grew up differently, and some cities put capital into buildings and trucks, and some cities paid other cities, and now we're trying to go back somehow and reset this thing that we all had in mind, or they had in mind in 1964. But the fact is, a lot has changed since 1964. So in your professional firefighter opinion, what is the ideal solution? Without an ordinance in 1964, what does the ideal solution actually look like for Cache County?
I think the ideal solution, like I said, there's two issues. One is equal funding. So I think there are people who aren't paying for the service they're receiving. And I think that we're not accommodating growth. So if the solution to accommodate that growth is to create a unified funding mechanism that can build the stations and put the people where they need to be, then that's the solution.
And is there a third leg there, that it's not equal funding, but it's also not equal service at this point? Is that also an objective?
That's true. I mean, we definitely want to make sure we have adequate service, and there's no way that you're going to have equal service. Not even every big city has equal service. Logan doesn't have equal service because there's different distance from the station to the house. You know, you can look at it on one spectrum and say, what's the best service we could get? Well, it's fire engine and ambulance parked at every house, so when 911's called, they walk out and they're there. Obviously, that's never going to happen. There's no way to pay for that. So then the flip side of that is, what's the minimal service that we need? Well, somebody can show up and put the fire out because it's all burned out. Nobody wants to be there either. We want to save our property. We want to save our lives. And to create some balance of that's affordable, but effective, is kind of the balance we have to get to. I can tell you right now, you saw that fire, right? That's how much time we have. And we don't have time to get to the fires that we're seeing right now. We've got big holes with large populations in the Nibley-Millville area and in the Hyde Park area. Those are holes that need to be filled. I respect the autonomy of the individual departments, and if that's the best way to keep our volunteers, then I'm all for it. We want to keep that volunteer model as long as we can because it's the most cost effective. I don't see any reason, and I guess based on what Amy's seen, you know, a fire district is typically a top-down, all the employees are members of the district, it's all funded from the same thing, the service comes from one thing. It's simple. It's much more simple than what we're working with here. Is the right answer now? I'm not sure it is. I think it may be eventually, but that's down the road a little ways. And that was a way to say, I'm not sure I answered your question.
As well as I think anybody could.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, it's interesting, but in 64, the list of goals that they had, they did fulfill those.
Mm-hmm.
but the level of volunteerism was a lot higher. And so, districts were still, a lot of them were in infancy. And your districts have changed throughout the whole state. And we've got a huge now state department that just looks over districts. And, you know, and so that has actually changed in how those are regulated. And so you've got, we just did not keep up with the district's regulations and how the state says, now if you're gonna be a district, this is what you got. We just did not do that.
I grant you that. It may have been, I don't mean to sell the council in 1964 or 65 short, I don't know any
Yeah,
of them.
no, but you can just see that they've,
It may have been a solution for a short period of time.
you know, but it was, communities were extremely proud of the volunteer organizations that they had, and they had great ones, and it was, when something's working really, really good, you almost don't wanna go down to the state and say, hey, what do we need to do when it's been working good? But things have changed. They really have, dramatically.
And to expand on your question, I don't know that we should really worry so much about what was established in 1965 and let that be a limiting thing. I mean, there are some legal issues that you'd have to overcome. But what is best for the fire service moving forward is really the question we want to ask. And sorry, let me rephrase that. What's best for the public moving forward is the question to ask. And if we, as a group, can answer that question and put that into place, then we're finally going to get caught up. Because right now, we're so far behind in being able to provide that service.
So I'm just curious, like, what now? What's kind of the outlook and what's our decision point as a fire board and as the county council? Because we all have this information, I think our heads are swimming a little bit, but what are our decision points?
I think the next step would be to come up with, assuming that this is a direction we want to go, I think the next step would be come up with a 5 or 10 year plan and get it in front of people and say, yes, we agree with this plan, no, we don't like it, both at the fire service level, fire department level, and at the district level, to say, yes, we want to move forward with that, or no, that we don't like that plan, we don't want to do it that way.
But inaction is not an option, so.
Inaction, I don't think is an option.
So really, we're just trying to say, I think right now, what you're telling me is we as a fire district, board, and county council, we need to come together and say what we want those next 5 to 10 years to look like? Is that kind of?
Yes.
And I guess specifically if you want to be a sovereign entity or.
Well, and that's one of the options.
Yeah.
That may not be the option, and maybe that's 10 years down the road, where you want to get to. But I don't want to make any long-term plans without the input of the fire departments as well. Because they're the stakeholders. They're the ones that show up at your door, not me. Well, I do, but I'm usually later. So if you would like us to start working in that direction, it'll take some time, several months, but we can update you either on a monthly or bi-monthly basis of where we're at.
I think where I am, and obviously everyone can weigh in on this, but I need some guidance, like technical guidance on how this could look before I can really say, no, I don't like that, or there's some inequality in implementation here. But for me, I don't know where to begin with this. So I think we do need you to kind of start walking down that path. I think inaction isn't an option. So I think what we need is just a proposal to say, you know, here's how this would look, and then to come up with some points where you're saying we need to decide whether it's this, or this.
Yeah, and we usually would start with a needs analysis, find out where we're at, where our weak points are, where our strengths are, how do we fill the weak points, and how do we strengthen the system and not replace the system.
So and again, I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Is that something that we could work on as a board? And I'm addressing our board members here. We work on as a board and then come to the county council and say, you know, this is our 5-year plan and this is our 10-year plan. And then at that point, I don't want to do necessarily a joint session every time. I feel like this is something as a board we could work on, and then come and check in regularly with the council, the county council, to make sure that it is in alignment with what the county council's priorities are. Does that sound like that would work? Now I'm addressing my fellow
Yeah.
council members.
That would be preferable. I don't think we need to be involved
The
in
board
that.
can decide, Captain, but there may even be a smaller kernel that needs to put forth with technical expertise.
Yes, yes, working in conjunction with our technical, because again, I don't know if, that's why Rod can't retire, sorry.
My replacement's here next week.
I'm making a phone call, sorry. No, so, Rod, what does that look like to you? Like, we meet as a board again once
Yeah.
a month?
Let's look at it. It
Okay.
might be every other month, because
Okay.
this will take quite a bit of time to put together. But it's moving in the right direction.
And then we check in with the county council, especially as it pertains to financial decisions,
Absolutely.
and that would be periodic.
Right, we need to understand the political side, the technical, not only firefighting side, but I didn't say truth in taxation, I said the taxing authority, right, side of things.
Yeah.
So we get help from you for that? Okay.
And these guys.
And our attorney.
And our attorney, yeah.
Amy.
Okay.
Okay.
So we will wait to have an invite for future meeting as a board?
Yes.
Okay. Is there,
Certainly within 2 months.
okay. And are there any further questions that we have from the fire board?
I'm just curious, what's the latest on the legal opinion about who gets to set that rate?
Who gets to set the rate?
The last time we had a discussion, there was a question about whether or not the fire board had the legal ability to set the rate.
The latest is the council has to set the council has to set the rate.
We're not even close to that.
Once there's a budget established.
So the
But
board
again-
would make a
I know
recommendation.
that's down the road, but I haven't heard an update on it, because there were
Until
questions
the
about
board
that.
is elected,
Yeah.
specifically to be board members. it
And I
would
think
be
we'll get
canceled.
more of that
Next
with their
year, right?
presentation.
So we'd recommend the county would issue it.
Yeah.
Have fun, guys. See you.
So, can we ask questions along the way?
Likewise.
Who can we ask questions to?
You can call me or my replacement at any time. I'll get you their phone number.
To the question, can
And,
we
and
have,
our attorney will be with our meetings every time too, I hope.
As
Most of
long
the
as, yeah, as long as it's not on the second Tuesday
Yeah.
at 5:30.
Do your best and appreciate it.
Other than that, yes.
Susie, could we have a copy of this? And it would help me a bunch if I had access to the underlying math.
That's up to these guys. I am fine with that, and you know where I am. You can call me
Wes
anytime
has
I want
got
to
it,
with
so.
you.
Have you got?
That's up to you.
Sorry, I sent down
We wanna allow Larry to have access to the spreadsheets is what we're asking.
I would not recommend that.
Oh, viewing only.
This
Viewing.
presentation.
This
yeah.
presentation.
This
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of course,
that
of
would-
course.
With the underlying math,
Yeah.
not just the numbers.
Yeah, and that, our financial department has that already.
He's an engineer, I bet.
Who said?
No, I'm kidding.
It's written all
one else
over you.
No.
Okay, do we have any further questions, for either our board attorney, Chief Hammer?
Many thanks.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
or Susie, excuse me, thank you, Susie, for joining us today.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Reach out if you have questions. I'm happy to go through them. Just call me.
Okay. Thank you.
Given time, it will work out. It really will.
Yeah,
And it'll take
baby
time,
steps.
but
Now, there's an engineering saying that we can solve any technical problem. Anything you want solved, we can solve it. It may take an infinite amount of money and an infinite amount of time,
But
but.
I think it's also baby steps aren't bad. As we go through this,
Infinite amount of time.
we will
infinite
get
amount
to,
of
we
Yeah.
will get to a solid foundation on it.
Okay, well, if there's no further questions or business, we'll go ahead and stand adjourned. That was half-hearted.
Saying that thing.
Troy, you're right.
Yeah, I should have.
Amy Hughley.
Just a little bit.
So, what's your phone number?
Thank you.
Do you want mine?
Okay,